So this afternoon, Davy G and I will each speak briefly, and then we will have a chance for you all to ask questions if you would like. So I want to talk a little bit about balancing out our basic nature. Each of us has, and put it this way, in the Gita, it's presented that there are three basic paths, or four basic paths of yoga. But what this is attempting to do is address people's different natures. And so there's the path of devotion, bhakti yoga. There's the path of discrimination, jnana yoga. And the path of service, karma yoga. And then the path that combines all of those together, Raja Yoga, which includes meditation. Ours is the path of Raja Yoga, but within, the reason it's called Raja Yoga is that just as a king, a Raja, combines all of the districts of his kingdom into one whole, Raja Yoga integrates all of our various aspects into one unified whole, and then takes it deeper through the practice of meditation. But coming back to the other three paths, each of us tends to have one aspect of our nature that is more dominant. Often for men, it's the intellect, and often for women, it's the emotion or devotion, the feeling nature, as Yogananda called it. Now that's not always true, and it's always a little bit of a perilous place to be too general and to say that all women are emotional and all men are just intellectual. It isn't that way at all. But there is generally for each of us one aspect of us that's more dominant. And in our spiritual path, God loves us just as we are. We don't have to become somebody different. We don't have to become somehow something that feels foreign to our own basic nature. So if we're basically devotional, then increase that devotion. The difference between devotion and emotion is that emotion is feeling turned out to the world. Perhaps in desires, perhaps in loves, perhaps in likes and dislikes. But it's our feelings about things, but feelings about things in the world. Devotion is to take that same feeling nature, but turn it toward God. And doing that, we uplift that aspect of our being, and we, in fact, will feel much closer to God if we can awaken our devotion. When Swamiji was with Yogananda, he told him over and over to get devotion. Part of that was that when Swamiji came to Master, he was quite out of balance in terms of these different aspects. And I would say in America, by and large, devotion is not nearly as well understood as it is in India. And we also have a work in Italy, and devotion is naturally understood also in Italy, but not so much in America. And Swamiji was quite, in fact, extremely intellectual when he first came to Master. He was extremely intelligent and very well educated. He spoke 9 different languages, and he had studied, he'd studied Greek, he had studied Greek myths, and he was brought up in Europe. And he had the kind of mind that could best anyone in an argument. But when he came to Master, increasingly he did not like that part of himself that was intellectually kind of competitive. And Master, of course, could read, and not only read character, he knew every thought that his disciples were thinking. And he told his disciples that and often demonstrated it. But what he told for Swamiji is he said, get devotion, because that part was there from ancient times, but in this life it had not yet, it was like a garden that had not received any water. And so Swamiji spent hours each day chanting. He had a harmonium and he would chant for hours every day, and gradually his heart's energy began to open up. As Dharmarajan said during our meditation, Master said that chanting is half the battle, because chanting, the chants that Master gave us to do, are basically affirmations. And Swamiji, in his own right, also wrote many, many chants, and they tend to be simple affirmations repeated over and over again. I want only Thee, Lord, Thee, only Thee. Or one of Master's favorites, and one that we chant often, is Door of my heart, open wide I keep for Thee. Wilt Thou come, just for once come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing Thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for Thee night and day. See how that opens the heart? And you repeat that over and over and over again, trying to go deeper. In fact, Yogananda said that when we chant, we should first chant out loud, because that awakens the energy and gets the energy flowing. And then we should chant more softly, and then whisper chanting, and then finally chanting silently. But when we chant, especially silently, don't focus on the words. Focus on the bhav behind the words. That this great yearning for God to come. And the words are just a carrier wave to bring that more. God doesn't need us to speak in words, after all. We need to speak in words. We need to clarify in our consciousness where our feeling nature, our love energy is flowing. And in this case, we need to turn that love energy toward God. Sri Yukteswar, who was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda, was very, very intellectually deep. And it was kind of hard to follow him. He wrote a scripture called Holy Science. And it was the comparison of some passages from Indian scriptures and from the Western Bible, and showing the similarities between those. And it also contained other aspects of mathematics and the yugas, and very, very deep and obtuse. And then at the end he says, and I hope that I have shown that love is the most important thing on the spiritual path. And you kind of scratch your head and say, well, if you say so, sir. But he said, you can't take one step on the spiritual path without love. And so awakening that devotional aspect is very, very important. But devotion alone can bring one, if it's true devotion, you don't need anything else. But a devotional aspect for most of us will contain in it not just devotion but emotion. And that emotion can bring one into a kind of ungrounded aspect, so that we don't think very practically, nor do we are we able to channel it and contain it and focus it. And so some bhakti yogis, if they're real bhakti yogis, that's different. But we grew up in America where during the time that we were coming on the path, there were many, many people who were attracted to the movement of ISKCON called Krishna consciousness in America. And they would sing and dance and just a great deal of emotion. And it was very, very attractive for a while. But then we saw that these people were kind of not functioning very well, not relating to other people very well. We talked with one of them and, came very open-heartedly and said, oh, it's beautiful. We love Krishna and, we all meditate on Krishna. And this fellow said, you can't meditate in America. Krishna says to sit on kusha grass. Kusha grass does not grow in America. You can't meditate here. So he had gotten fanatical and narrow-minded. And so unbalanced feeling can result in an unbalanced life. And so it's good also to balance the wisdom aspect. One of the things that both Swamiji and Yogananda did was to lecture over and over, night after night, hundreds of lectures that you can read of Master on all kinds of subjects. And so reading some of those things broadens out the concept of what God is, because there's real wisdom. Just intellectual, obtuseness doesn't do any good. Swamiji worked and worked and worked on his writings. He would sometimes edit a book 50 different times, going through it, and not just make a change here and a change there. He would make so many changes on a page that you couldn't even read the words anymore. And then somebody would have to type that up fresh, and then he would continue to edit, because he said what he wanted to do when he was writing was first he wanted to get the ideas out clearly. So his first time through, he would just, if he had a thought, I should include this, he would just type it in so he didn't lose it. Then he went through to make sure that the ideas were stated clearly so that people could understand them. And he said that those writers who are poor writers trying to impress their audience with how intellectual they are will not only not make their sentences clear, they will purposely make them obscure. So the reader can't understand them and thinks, oh, he must be such a brilliant person. In fact, there was a study done where they took scientific papers and the same content, but some of the papers they wrote so that they were easily understandable, same content, and other used big words that didn't add any content but just made it seem more intellectual. And then they had them graded, and the obscure ones received much higher grades in the scientific community. Well, some writers are like that. They're the kind of writers that you read a page or two before you are going to go to bed, and you find yourself nodding off into sleep more and more quickly. So you don't need sleeping pills when you have a book like that. Swami was the opposite. He wanted to do all of the work for the reader so that the thoughts were crystal clear. Then he would make them very clear, very simple in terms of how he stated them. Then he would go through to make sure that they had magnetism. So he would change something, perhaps add a story or an example, but so that the reader was magnetized to really not just understand, but want to get into this subject. And then he would go through a final time, he said, to make it beautiful. And at that time, he would sometimes work on the rhythm of the sentence so that the rhythm worked. He would, like a poet, he would put one word in instead of another word simply because this word was more beautiful, had a lilting vowel sound, and he would put that in. But he would put the wisdom out in such a way that we could come to grasp with it. And so reading Masters' writings or reading Swamiji's writings, both of which we have back there, if you haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi, that book has changed the lives of millions and millions of people. If you have not read that, I urge you to read that. That's what started me and many, many of the people at Ananda on the spiritual path. It also started many people who aren't followers of Yogananda on the spiritual path. And so read that. There's also a wonderful book called The New Path, which is Swamiji's autobiography about his years with Master. And from that, you will understand in a much deeper way what the real guru-disciple relationship is like. So I would recommend highly those two books, but balancing not just the intellect, but wisdom. Because what we want, what Swamiji said what wisdom is the heart's energy, the feeling energy, and the discrimination energy combined. And so when you can combine those two, that's when you really begin to understand something. And then finally, I don't know of a single spiritual path that's valid that does not emphasize serving other people. If you do not serve other people, let me put it very bluntly, there's something wrong with you. You're too self-centered, and you're too focused on what I want, what can I get, what can I have. In order to break that, which is the ego, that is the exact opposite of what we want. We want to dissolve the ego. And one of the very best ways of dissolving the ego is to serve people, to give to people, to give to people who are in need, to give to poor people, to give to children, to give to those who are in need of something. In fact, here's a secret to life. If you want something, give it away. If you feel that you do not have enough money, find somebody who needs money more than you do and give him some or her some. Give to charity, give to someone. If you feel that you're lonely, give love and friendship to someone. That which you feel you do not have, you must first give to others, and then the universe will give that back to you. And so true service is not what we do with our hands or our mouth, it's what we do with our heart. And when we can serve with our heart, serve a good cause, serve other people, it will help develop us. And when we bring all the different aspects of ourself into balance, we'll find that our spiritual progress is much faster and not retarded because some element is, some part of our garden is not being watered.